So this one night, I was home alone, just like any other evening after work. I'd had a pretty long day, and all I really wanted to do was unwind and forget about all the stress. My go-to way of doing that is to hop on my computer and play some games. Nothing too intense, just enough to keep my mind off everything else. I just installed a new game that my friends had been raving about, so I figured I'd give it a try. It was one of those multiplayer shooter games, where you can just get lost in it for hours. I got home, grabbed a soda from the fridge, and headed straight to my room. My setup was in the corner, my desk cluttered with cables, a couple of empty cans, and my keyboard glowing in the low light. I booted up my computer, put on my headphones, and logged into the game. The house was quiet, just the way I like it. No distractions, no noise, just me and the game. I started playing, getting the hang of the controls and the map. I was so focused that I lost track of time. Before I knew it, a couple of hours had passed. I checked the time on my phone and it was already close to midnight. I figured I'd play one more round before calling it a night. That's when things started to get weird. I was in the middle of a game, running through this virtual landscape, trying to dodge enemy fire. My headphones were blasting the sounds of gunfire and explosions, so I was completely immersed. Suddenly, I thought I heard something, like a faint noise coming from the hallway outside my room. It was so soft, I wasn't sure if I'd actually heard it or if it was just part of the game. I paused for a second, listening, but there was nothing. Just silence. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe it was the house settling or something. You know how old houses are? They creak and groan at the weirdest times. I went back to my game, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But then I heard it again. This time, it was clearer, like a soft thud, almost like someone was walking around. My heart started to race a little. I took off my headphones and listened. There it was again, a distinct sound, like a footstep, coming from the hallway. I felt a chill run down my spine. I was sure I'd locked the front door when I got home. I always do. I stood up from my desk, my ears straining to catch any other sound. The house was still, too still. I walked over to my bedroom door and opened it, peeking out into the hallway. The lights were off, and everything looked normal. There was no one there. I stepped out into the hallway, my bare feet silent on the wooden floor. I moved slowly, my heart thudding in my chest. I checked the living room, the kitchen, even the bathroom. Everything was as it should be. No sign of anyone. I went to the front door and checked the lock. It was secure, just like I'd thought. I let out a breath, feeling a little stupid. Maybe I was just tired, hearing things that weren't there. I went back to my room, shaking my head at myself. I sat down at my desk, put my headphones back on, and tried to get back into the game. But I couldn't shake this feeling of unease, like something was off. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing there. My concentration was shot, so I decided to call it a night. I logged off the game, shut down my computer, and sat back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. That's when I heard it again, a soft, almost inaudible creak, like a door hinge. My bedroom door was closed, and I hadn't touched it. I turned my head slowly, my eyes fixed on the door. It was still closed, but I could feel my heart starting to race again. I stood up, walked over to the door, and opened it a crack. The hallway was dark, but nothing seemed out of place. I stood there for a moment, listening. Nothing, just silence. I closed the door and locked it this time, just to be sure. I turned back to my desk and started gathering my things. My phone, the empty soda can, trying to distract myself from the weird feeling that was creeping up on me. I glanced at my computer screen, which had gone to the desktop background, and noticed something odd. My webcam light was on. Now, here's the thing. I don't use my webcam. I have it taped over most of the time because I'm a little paranoid about privacy, But I'd taken the tape off earlier that day for a video call with a friend and had forgotten to put it back on. The light was on, which meant the camera was active, but I hadn't opened any app that would use it. I walked over to the desk, my eyes fixed on that tiny green light. I reached out and turned off the monitor, but the light stayed on. My stomach dropped. I quickly sat down, opened my task manager, and checked for any programs running that could be using the webcam. Nothing, just the game launcher and the usual background apps. I unplugged the webcam from the USB port and the light went off. I sat there for a minute, staring at the blank screen. my mind racing. How long had it been on? Had someone been watching me? I felt exposed, like I'd been caught off guard. I grabbed the tape and covered the camera again, my hands shaking a little. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just a glitch, some random software issue. But my gut was telling me something else, something I didn't want to admit. I stood up, deciding to call it a night for real this time. I was about to turn off the lights and head to bed when I heard a noise from the hallway again. This time it was different, not a creak or a thud, but a faint scraping sound, like something being dragged along the floor. My heart skipped a beat. I turned off the lights in my room, plunging it into darkness, and stood there, listening. The sound came again, a slow, deliberate scraping, getting closer. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, and my mind was screaming at me to do something, but I felt frozen. I moved quietly to the door, pressing my ear against it, trying to figure out what the sound was. It stopped, and I held my breath, waiting. Then, a soft knock, just once, on my bedroom door. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I backed away from the door, my mind racing with what to do. I reached for my phone, my hands trembling, and dialed 911, but I hesitated. What would I say? I didn't even know what was going on. I stood there, phone in hand, listening. Nothing but silence. I slowly walked back to the door and opened it a crack, peering out into the dark hallway. There was no one there, just the faint outline of the furniture in the dim light coming from the window. I opened the door wider and stepped out, my eyes scanning the hallway. As I stood there, trying to figure out what to do next, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. The bathroom door at the end of the hallway was slightly ajar. I was sure I'd left it closed. I moved slowly down the hallway, my footsteps light on the floor, and reached the bathroom door. I pushed it open with my foot, my heart racing. The bathroom was empty, just the sink, the shower, and the small window above the toilet. I turned on the light, looking around, trying to see if anything was out of place. That's when I saw it. On the mirror, written in what looked like steam, was a single word: watch. My blood ran cold. I stepped back, my hand over my mouth, trying to process what I was seeing. I hadn't taken a shower, and there was no reason for there to be steam on the mirror. Someone had been in my house. Someone had written that while I was playing my game, completely oblivious. I felt sick, my mind reeling. How long had they been there? Were they still in the house? I turned and ran back to my room, locking the door behind me. I grabbed my phone and called 911, my voice shaking as I tried to explain what was happening. The operator told me to stay on the line, that officers were on their way. I could barely think, my mind jumping from one thought to the next. I sat on the floor, my back against the door, listening for any sound. Minutes felt like hours, but eventually, I heard the sound of sirens. The police arrived, and I unlocked the door, rushing to meet them. They searched the house from top to bottom, checking every room, every closet, but there was no one there. No sign of forced entry, no evidence of anyone else. Just me and that message on the mirror. The police took my statement, assured me they'd keep an eye on the area, and left. I was too shaken to stay there alone, so I called a friend and went over to their place for the night. I didn't sleep much, my mind replaying everything over and over. The next day, I changed all the locks on my doors and set up security cameras around the house. I never found out who it was or why they were there. And that's what still haunts me. Knowing someone was in my house, watching me, leaving messages for me to find. It's a feeling I can't shake, like a shadow following me around. Every night, before I go to bed, I check all the doors and windows, making sure they're locked. I glance at the mirror in the bathroom, half expecting to see another message. And whenever I hear a noise in the hallway, my heart skips a beat, and I find myself listening, waiting, just in case. Alright, so this happened a while back, but I still get the chills whenever I think about it. I was at home, alone, just doing my usual thing, playing games on my computer. It was a Friday night, and I didn't have any plans to go out, which was pretty standard for me. I mean, I'm not really the party type. I'd much rather be at home, headphones on, immersed in a game. That night was no different. I was playing one of those online multiplayer games, where you team up with random people and try to complete missions. You know, the kind where you can lose hours without even noticing. I've been playing for a couple of hours already, lost in the game. My room was dark, except for the glow of my monitor, and the sound of my teammates shouting over the voice chat filled the room. I had the window cracked open a bit to let in some fresh air, and I could hear the occasional sound of cars driving by or people talking on the street. It must have been around 11 p.m. when I noticed something odd. I was in the middle of a game, about to complete a mission, when my screen flickered, just for a second. At first I thought it was the game glitching out, which wasn't unusual, but then it happened again, and the sound in my headphones cut out briefly. I frowned, glancing at the little Wi-Fi icon in the corner of my screen. The connection looked fine. I shrugged it off, figuring it was just a random lag spike, and kept playing. But the flickering kept happening. Every few minutes my screen would flash, like it was trying to tell me something. And every time it did, I'd lose audio for a second. It was starting to mess with my focus, and I could feel myself getting more and more irritated. I decided to take a break, maybe reset my router, see if that fixed things. I stood up, stretching my legs, and walked over to my router in the corner of the room. I turned it off, waited a few seconds, then turned it back on. The lights blinked a few times before settling into a steady glow. I hoped that would be enough to fix whatever was going on. I grabbed a soda from the mini fridge next to my desk and sat back down, ready to get back into the game. Everything seemed fine for a while. The screen stayed stable, no more flickering, and the sound was back to normal. I got back into the flow of the game, forgetting all about the issues. That's when I heard it, the faintest sound of shuffling behind me. It was so soft that I almost missed it, barely audible over the game's sound effects and my teammates' voices. I paused the game and pulled off my headphones, listening carefully. The room was quiet except for the hum of my computer and the faint buzz of the ceiling fan. I told myself it was probably just the house settling or maybe a breeze from the open window. But as I sat there, I heard it again. A soft, almost imperceptible rustling, like someone gently moving through the room. I turned around, my eyes scanning the dark corners of my room. Nothing. Just my bed, the dresser, the closed closet door. Everything looked normal, the way it always did. I shook my head, laughing at myself for being so paranoid, and put my headphones back on. I was just tired, that's all. But the feeling didn't go away. Even as I got back into my game, I couldn't shake the sense that something was off. My eyes kept darting to the corners of the screen, watching for more flickering, and my ears were tuned in for any sound beyond the game. I was jumpy, more aware of my surroundings than I usually was when I played. About an hour passed, and just as I was starting to relax, my screen flickered again. This time, it stayed dark for a second longer than before, long enough for me to see my own reflection in the blackness. And in that reflection, I thought I saw something move behind me, just a shadow passing by. I ripped off my headphones, spinning around in my chair, my heart pounding. Nothing. The room was empty, just like before. My eyes scanned every corner, every shadow, looking for anything out of place. But there was nothing. The window was still open a crack, the blinds swaying slightly in the breeze. I stood up and walked over to the window, peering out into the dark street below. It was quiet, almost deserted, just the occasional car passing by. I closed the window, deciding that maybe it was just the wind playing tricks on me. I turned back to my computer, but something made me stop. My closet door, which I was sure had been closed earlier, was now slightly ajar. Just a crack, barely noticeable, but enough for me to see the darkness inside. I stared at it, my mind racing. Had I left it open? I couldn't remember. Maybe I'd gone in there earlier and forgotten to close it all the way. But then I thought about the noises I'd heard, the flickering screen, the feeling that something was off. I took a step toward the closet, then stopped. I could feel my heart beating in my chest, hard and fast. I didn't want to look, didn't want to see what might be inside, but I knew I wouldn't be able to focus on anything else until I did. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves, and walked over to the closet. I reached out, my hand shaking slightly, and pulled the door open. Nothing, just clothes hanging neatly, shoes lined up on the floor, the usual stuff. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, laughing at myself again. I was being ridiculous. It was just a closet, and I was letting my imagination get the best of me. I pushed the door shut, making sure it clicked into place this time, and went back to my desk. I put my headphones back on, determined to get back into the game and forget about the whole thing. But the uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the closet door open again, or something moving in the shadows. My focus was gone, and I could feel my anxiety creeping up. I decided to call it a night. I shut down my computer, the screen going dark, and stood up. I grabbed my phone from the desk, intending to check my messages before bed. As I looked down at the screen, I noticed a notification I hadn't seen before, an AirDrop request from unknown device. I frowned. I didn't use AirDrop, and I was pretty sure it was turned off. The message was simple. Hello. That's all it said. I felt a chill run down my spine. I glanced around the room, my phone still in my hand. My Wi-Fi was secured, and I didn't have any neighbors close enough to connect. How could someone send me an AirDrop request? I declined the request, my heart racing again. I quickly checked my settings, making sure AirDrop was turned off. Then I locked my phone and put it down, trying to shake off the unease. I told myself it was just a glitch, maybe some random device nearby trying to connect. It didn't mean anything. I got ready for bed, brushing my teeth and changing into pajamas. I tried to focus on the routine, hoping it would calm me down. But as I climbed into bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the flickering screen, the noises, the open closet door, and now the AirDrop message. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The house was quiet, too quiet. Every creak and groan of the building sounded amplified, echoing through my room. I kept glancing over at the closet door, making sure it stayed closed. Just as I was starting to drift off, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I reached over, thinking it might be a text from a friend, but when I looked at the screen, it was another AirDrop request. Unknown device, it read again, followed by another simple message. Are you there? I sat up, my hands shaking. This wasn't just some random glitch. Someone was trying to get to me, and they were close enough to connect to my phone. I felt trapped, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to do. I declined the request again and turned my phone off completely, tossing it onto the nightstand. I lay back down, pulling the covers up to my chin, my eyes locked on the closet door. I didn't sleep much that night, every sound making me jump, every shadow looking like it was moving. I kept waiting for something to happen, for the closet door to open, for a noise, for anything. The next morning I got up, exhausted and still on edge. I checked my phone, but there were no new messages, no AirDrop requests. Everything seemed normal. I told myself it had just been a bad night, that I'd overreacted, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I spent the day trying to distract myself, but the unease lingered. I kept checking my phone, looking around my room, making sure everything was in its place. By the time night fell again, I was dreading going to bed, afraid of what might happen if I let my guard down. That night, as I lay in bed, my eyes on the closet door, I thought about those AirDrop messages. Who had sent them? How had they connected to my phone? I didn't have any answers, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone that night, and the thought of being watched, even for a moment, still sends chills down my spine. It was one of those perfect Friday nights when I had nothing to do and nowhere to be, just the way I like it. My roommates were out, one was working a late shift, and the other had gone out of town for the weekend. So I had the entire apartment to myself, which doesn't happen very often. I decided to take full advantage of it, ordered some pizza, and settled in for a night of gaming. There's something about playing video games alone that's both relaxing and intense. You get so caught up in the game that the rest of the world just fades away. I had my headphones on, the volume cranked up, and was fully immersed in a first-person shooter that I've been hooked on lately. You know, the kind where you're constantly on edge, trying to survive and outsmart enemies. It was the perfect way to blow off some steam after a long week. The night went on, and I barely noticed the time passing. I was in the zone, winning match after match, feeling pretty good about myself. It must have been around midnight when I took a break. I grabbed a cold soda from the fridge and stood in the kitchen for a minute, stretching my legs. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that only happens late at night when everyone else is asleep and the world feels still. I went back to my room, ready to dive back into the game. I sat down, put on my headphones, and clicked to start a new match. But that's when I heard it. A noise, faint at first, coming from somewhere in the apartment. I paused the game, took off my headphones, and listened. For a moment, there was nothing. Just the hum of the computer and the distant sounds of cars passing by outside. Then I heard it again, clearer this time. It was a soft, creaking sound, like a floorboard groaning under someone's weight. My heart started to beat a little faster. I told myself it was just the old apartment settling, which wasn't uncommon, especially when the temperature dropped at night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was something else. I got up from my chair, opened my bedroom door, and peered down the hallway. The lights were off, and the only illumination came from the glow of my computer screen and the streetlights outside. I stood there for a moment, listening. Everything was silent again. I took a few steps down the hall, glancing into the living room and kitchen. Nothing seemed out of place. I shrugged it off, convincing myself I was being paranoid. I went back to my room, closed the door, and sat down at my desk. I put my headphones back on and started playing again, trying to get back into the game. But that uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see something there. After about 10 minutes, I heard another noise, this time louder. It sounded like a door creaking open, coming from the direction of the living room. My heart was pounding now, and I pulled off my headphones, listening intently. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I didn't want to admit it, but I was starting to get scared. I got up again, this time more cautiously. I opened my bedroom door just a crack, peering out into the hallway. Everything looked the same, dark and still. I stepped out, my footsteps barely making a sound on the carpet. I moved down the hall, peeking into the living room. The front door was closed and locked, just like I'd left it. The kitchen was empty too. I checked the windows next, making sure they were all closed. They were. I felt a little silly, like I was jumping at shadows. Maybe I'd just been too into the game, and my mind was playing tricks on me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. I turned around to head back to my room, but as I did, I heard a faint rustling sound, like fabric brushing against something. It was coming from the hallway closet. I froze, staring at the closet door. It was closed, but I hadn't checked it. I stood there, my heart beating so loud I was sure whoever or whatever was inside could hear it. I took a step closer, my hand reaching out for the doorknob. My mind was racing with all sorts of possibilities. Maybe one of my roommates had come back early, or maybe it was a stray cat that somehow got in. I tried to rationalize it, but deep down, I knew neither made sense. I grabbed the doorknob and turned it slowly, inching the door open. The closet was dark, and I couldn't see anything inside. I reached in, feeling for the light switch. I flipped it on, the light flickering to life, revealing a bunch of old coats, shoes, and boxes. Nothing out of the ordinary. I let out a shaky breath, relieved. I closed the closet door and turned to go back to my room. But that's when I saw it, a shadow, moving across the wall at the end of the hallway, near the bathroom. My heart stopped. It was quick, like someone walking past, just a flicker of darkness against the dim light. I stood there, frozen, staring at the spot where I'd seen the shadow. I didn't know what to do. I was alone in the apartment, or at least I thought I was. I tried to think rationally, to come up with an explanation, but I couldn't. My mind kept going back to the sounds I'd heard, the feeling of being watched. I knew I had to check it out to make sure I wasn't just imagining things. I moved slowly down the hallway, my eyes scanning the shadows, looking for any sign of movement. I reached the bathroom door and pushed it open, flicking on the light. It was empty, just like I'd left it. I checked behind the shower curtain, under the sink, anywhere someone could hide. Nothing. I turned off the light and stepped back into the hallway. My hands were shaking, and I could feel a cold sweat on my forehead. I didn't know what to think. Maybe I was just tired, my mind playing tricks on me. I decided to go back to my room and lock the door. Maybe call a friend just to have someone to talk to. As I walked back to my room, I heard another noise, this time from the kitchen. It was a soft thud, like something being set down on the counter. I felt a surge of fear. I knew I hadn't imagined it. I grabbed my phone from my pocket, ready to call for help, but there was no signal. Just my luck, right? I took a deep breath and made my way to the kitchen. I had to know what was going on. As I stepped into the kitchen, I saw it, a knife, lying on the floor in the middle of the room. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't used a knife all night. How did it get there? I looked around the kitchen, every corner, every shadow, but there was nothing, no one, just a knife on the floor. I picked it up, holding it tightly, feeling a strange sense of security from its weight. I backed out of the kitchen, keeping my eyes on the doorway, and headed back to my room. I closed the door behind me, locked it, and grabbed a chair to prop under the handle. I sat down at my desk, the knife still in my hand, my eyes darting around the room. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't call anyone, couldn't leave without knowing who or what was in the apartment. I sat there for what felt like hours, listening to every creak, every rustle, every sound. The apartment was quiet again, almost eerily so. I kept thinking about the shadow, the knife, the noises. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Eventually, exhaustion took over. I must have dozed off at some point because the next thing I knew, it was morning. Sunlight was streaming through the curtains, and everything looked normal again. The fear from the night before seemed like a distant memory, almost like a bad dream. I got up, cautiously opened my bedroom door, and stepped into the hallway. The apartment was quiet, nothing out of place. I checked the kitchen. The knife was back in the drawer where it belonged. I checked the living room, the front door. Everything was as it should be. I don't know what happened that night. Maybe I was just tired, my mind playing tricks on me. Maybe it was something else. I never told my roommates about it, didn't want them to think I was losing it. But since then, I've been a lot more cautious, locking doors, keeping a light on at night. Every now and then, when I'm sitting at my computer late at night, I still think about that shadow, the feeling of being watched. I tell myself it was nothing, just my imagination. But deep down, I know that feeling of unease, that sense of something not being right, wasn't just in my head. And sometimes when the apartment is quiet and I'm alone, I still feel like I'm being watched.